All right, so get this. President Trump just dropped a pretty big bombshell. I mean, he's creating a strategic Bitcoin reserve for the U.S.
Oh,
Yeah, like Fort Knox, but for Bitcoin,
yeah.
and a separate stockpile for other cryptocurrencies. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's like hitting fast forward on the whole crypto adoption thing.
Totally. And we've got reports, reactions, and even some juicy details about which coins made it into this digital treasure chest. You ready to dive in?
Let's do it. This is a really bold move, no doubt about it.
Yeah.
And I think it's not just about acknowledging Bitcoin. It's a statement that the U.S. government sees digital assets as a key part of the future for finance.
Okay, so let's unpack this executive order. First off, it mandates building this strategic Bitcoin reserve using Bitcoin seized from criminal activity. Thing like drug busts, cybercrime,
Yeah,
those sorts of things.
like turning lemons into digital gold.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a clever way to acquire Bitcoin without dipping into taxpayer funds or making a big splash in the market, which could impact the price.
Yeah.
Makes you wonder what could have been if they'd held on to the Bitcoin they already had. Apparently, over the last decade, the government sold off about 195,000 Bitcoin
Oh, wow.
for a measly $366 million. That same stash would be worth a whopping $17 billion today.
That's a huge figure, and it really underscores the growth of Bitcoin over the past decade.
Yeah.
It makes you think twice about holding on to your assets long term.
No kidding. Okay, but here's where it gets even more interesting. There's a second stockpile specifically for other cryptocurrencies, not just Bitcoin. We're talking XRP, Solana, even Cardano. Why these specific coins, and what does their inclusion say about the government's strategy?
Well, including these altcoins definitely broadens the scope. Remember, each of these has its own unique features, and potential XRP is still navigating that SEC lawsuit,
Yeah.
but has its roots in cross-border payments. Solana, known for NFTs and those decentralized applications, or dApps, is all about speed and scalability. Cardano is aiming to build a super secure and sustainable blockchain platform.
It's like they're hedging their bets, diversifying their digital portfolio, right?
Mhm.
But it also raises questions. Is this like a tacit endorsement of these specific projects? Could we see more institutional interest in these coins just because they're part of this national stockpile?
It's definitely a possibility. And think about the signal this sends to the world.
Right.
The U.S. isn't just dipping its toes into the crypto waters, it's diving in head first. This could trigger a domino effect with other nations feeling the pressure to establish their own digital asset reserves.
Right. Imagine a world where countries are scrambling to accumulate not just gold, but Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. That's a whole new kind of geopolitical chess game, and it's fascinating to consider how it might play out.
Absolutely. The implications are far-reaching, impacting everything from global power dynamics to the future of finance itself. We're essentially witnessing a paradigm shift in how we think about value and assets.
And the reactions from the crypto world have been just as intense. Brian Armstrong, the CEO of Coinbase, called this incredible execution and a historic moment for the whole crypto space. He's even predicting that other G20 nations will follow suit.
His enthusiasm is understandable. This lends a whole new level of legitimacy to cryptocurrencies and paves the way for broader adoption by both governments and institutions.
Yeah, Ryan Rasmussen, head of research at Bitwise, basically said, hold on to your hats because this is just the beginning. He even posed the question, will China, the UK, Russia, Japan all start hoarding Bitcoin now?
Mm.
What do you think? Is this the start of a global crypto gold rush?
It's a great question, and honestly, it's too early to say for sure, but the potential is certainly there. The U.S. making this move could set off a chain reaction leading to a global race to acquire these digital assets.
And how will that impact the price of Bitcoin? And what about the effects on the rest of the crypto market? We've already seen some wild swings in response to this news, haven't we?
It's been a roller coaster to say the least. Bitcoin initially dipped when the reserve was announced because it meant the U.S. wouldn't be buying more on the open market, but then it surged as the details about the stockpile and President Trump's own statements came out.
So a lot of uncertainty and volatility in the short term, but long term, it seems like this move could be extremely bullish for Bitcoin and the whole crypto ecosystem. What do you think?
It's certainly a possibility.
Yeah.
This kind of institutional adoption could be the catalyst that propels Bitcoin into the mainstream.
Yeah, the whole thing is unfolding so fast and it's hard to keep up. But before we get lost in the market frenzy, let's take a step back and consider another intriguing piece of this puzzle. Remember that crypto council that was supposed to advise President Trump on all things digital assets? What happened there?
Ah, yes. The Presidential Council of Advisors for Digital Assets, a grand idea that ultimately met an unfortunate end. Internal conflicts and power struggles between different industry factions ultimately led to its demise.
So instead of having this direct line of communication between the crypto world and the White House, we're left with kind of a void. What does this failed experiment tell us about the challenges of bridging the gap between this decentralized industry and the traditional world of government and finance?
I think it highlights the inherent tension between the decentralized ethos of crypto and the centralized nature of government. There's a fundamental clash of ideologies at play here, and it's not easy to reconcile.
It's like trying to fit a square peg into a round hole, right?
Yeah.
But the need for some kind of dialogue and collaboration is clear, and that brings us to the White House Crypto Summit that took place last week. Key players like Michael Saylor and Brian Armstrong were there rubbing elbows with government officials. What was the vibe, and what were the key takeaways?
It was less about networking and more about getting down to brass tacks on policy. The discussions focused on three key areas: market structure regulations and stablecoins. Essentially, they were grappling with the question of how to integrate this new technology into the existing financial system without stifling innovation.
So, like laying the groundwork for a future where crypto and traditional finance can coexist and maybe even complement each other sounds like a tall order. Did anything concrete come out of these talks?
Well, Senator Cynthia Lummis, who's been a vocal champion for crypto in Congress, hinted that new legislation regarding Bitcoin and digital assets could be hitting President Trump's desk soon. So stay tuned on that front. The regulatory landscape is clearly in flux, and this could be a major development.
Definitely something to keep an eye on. But speaking of impact, how has the market reacted to all this news? Has Bitcoin been moonwalking its way to new all-time highs? Or are investors hitting the panic button?
It's been a mixed bag, as you might expect. We've seen those wild price swings I mentioned earlier, and there's definitely a lot of uncertainty in the air.
So the market's still trying to digest all of this, figure out what it means for the future of crypto. I guess that's what makes this such a captivating story, right?
Yeah, definitely keeps us on our toes.
It certainly does.
It certainly keeps us on our toes. One thing we need to remember is that markets are driven by emotion, especially in the short term.
Yeah.
Fear and greed play a huge role, and with news this big, you're going to see both at play.
Makes sense. So beyond those like knee-jerk reactions, what are some of the more tangible effects we're seeing? Has the price of Bitcoin stabilized? And what about those altcoins included in the stockpile?
Well, as of Friday, Bitcoin was hovering around $88,000,
Okay.
which is a significant pullback from that initial surge.
Hmm.
But keep in mind, it's still up significantly year to date.
Right.
Ethereum followed a similar pattern, dipping and then recovering somewhat.
Uh-huh.
It's interesting to see that some of those altcoins in the stockpile have seen impressive gains.
Oh, yeah.
Cardano's up nearly 42%, and XRP, despite the ongoing SEC battle, is up 16%.
So the inclusion in this national crypto collection is giving them a bit of a boost, huh?
Yeah, I think.
It's like a stamp of approval, even if it's not explicitly intended that way. Do you think that's a sustainable trend, or is it just hype?
Time will tell, but it wouldn't surprise me to see continued interest in these specific altcoins. Remember, scarcity drives value, and being part of a limited stockpile held by the U.S. government certainly creates a sense of scarcity.
That's a really good point. And it's not just the crypto markets feeling the impact. We're seeing ripples in the stock market as well, right? What's happening with companies like Coinbase and MicroStrategy?
Coinbase, being the largest U.S. crypto exchange, has seen some modest gains, but the real winner so far has been MicroStrategy.
Yeah.
Remember, they've been betting big on Bitcoin, holding a massive amount on their balance sheet. Their stock price has jumped about 17% this past week.
It's so fascinating to see how this one decision is sending shockwaves across different sectors.
Yeah.
It really highlights the growing interconnectedness between the crypto world and the traditional financial system. This isn't some isolated phenomenon anymore. It's becoming increasingly mainstream.
Absolutely. And as crypto continues to mature and gain wider adoption, we're only going to see those connections deepen. What was once a fringe asset class is now forcing its way into the center of the global financial conversation.
You mentioned earlier that this U.S. strategic Bitcoin reserve could spark a global race to accumulate digital assets.
Yeah.
What would that look like? Paint a picture for me.
Imagine a world where nations are vying for control, not just of physical resources like oil or gold, but of these digital assets that underpin the emerging digital economy. It's a scenario that could completely reshape the geopolitical landscape as we know it.
Wow, that's a pretty mind-blowing concept. It's almost like the space race, but instead of aiming for the moon, we're all racing to secure our place in this new digital frontier. What are some of the potential consequences of this digital arms race?
Well, for one, it could lead to increased competition and tension between nations. We could see countries engaging in economic warfare, using their digital assets as leverage, to gain an advantage. It could also have significant implications for monetary policy and global trade.
This is starting to sound a bit like a science fiction movie.
Yeah.
But I guess that's the thing about this whole crypto revolution, right? It's pushing us to reimagine the world, to rethink our assumptions about how things work.
It's exactly. It's a challenge to our traditional systems and institutions, but it's also an incredible opportunity. This technology has the potential to level the playing field, to empower individuals, and to create a more equitable and inclusive financial system.
So alongside the risks and uncertainties, there's also this sense of hope and possibility. It's like we're standing at a crossroads, and the choices we make now will shape the future for generations to come.
That's a powerful way to put it, and it circles back to that central question we posed earlier. Is Bitcoin the new gold? Is it the digital asset that will define this new era?
Okay, I'm ready to unpack that analogy. Help me understand how Bitcoin could potentially play a similar role to gold in this emerging digital landscape.
Think about the qualities that have made gold so valuable for centuries.
Okay.
It's scarce, durable, divisible, and universally recognized as a store of value.
Uh-huh.
Bitcoin shares many of those same attributes. It has a limited supply, it's resistant to tampering, and its value can be easily transferred across borders.
So in a world where data is increasingly seen as the new oil, Bitcoin could be seen as the new gold, the safe haven asset in this new digital economy.
That's the argument,
Yes.
and it's gaining traction.
Of course.
Of course, there are key differences as well.
Okay.
Bitcoin is still a relatively new and volatile asset. Its price fluctuates dramatically,
Yeah.
and its long-term future is far from certain. But the fact that the U.S. government is now treating it as a strategic asset lends weight to the idea that it could indeed become a dominant store of value in the digital age.
It's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? The more governments and institutions treat Bitcoin as a valuable asset, the more valuable it becomes.
There's definitely an element of that at play.
Yeah.
But remember, Bitcoin's value isn't solely derived from government recognition. It's also based on its underlying technology, its decentralized nature, and its growing network of users.
So it's a complex interplay of factors that are driving Bitcoin's rise. And this decision by the U.S. government has just added another layer of complexity to the equation. I'm curious to hear what our listeners think about all of this. Do you see Bitcoin as the new gold? Is it a bubble waiting to burst? Or is it the foundation of a new financial order? We'd love to hear your thoughts.
We've covered a lot of ground today, from President Trump's executive order to the potential for a global crypto arms race. But as always, we want to leave you with something to ponder, something to spark your own deep dive into this fascinating topic.
So here's a question to consider as we wrap up this episode. What are the ethical implications of this move by the U.S. government? Is it right for them to be amassing these digital assets, potentially influencing the market and shaping the future of this technology? Or is this a necessary step to ensure stability and security in the evolving financial landscape?
It's a question that deserves careful consideration. There are no easy answers, and it's a debate that's likely to continue as the crypto world evolves.
We'll be back with part 3 after a quick message to delve further into these ethical considerations. Don't go anywhere.
Okay, so we're back and ready to tackle those ethical questions we were talking about. The U.S. government diving headfirst into Bitcoin. It's a big move with some pretty big implications.
It really does raise questions about the role of government in this emerging space. Should they be players in the crypto game, potentially influencing the market with their actions? Or should they take a more hands-off approach and just let the technology develop organically?
It's a tough one. On one hand, having the U.S. government recognize Bitcoin as a strategic asset definitely lends it some legitimacy. It could even encourage more widespread adoption, which, let's be honest, is something a lot of crypto enthusiasts have been hoping for.
That's true. But you could also say that critics might argue that this level of government involvement could stifle innovation. The beauty of crypto for many is its decentralized nature, its freedom from traditional financial institutions and government control. Right. So is there a way to find a balance to harness the potential of this technology while also addressing those concerns about market manipulation or even, the potential for misuse?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it's one that policymakers and regulators around the world are dealing with right now. The White House Crypto Summit we talked about earlier is a perfect example of that struggle to find a middle ground.
Right. They're trying to figure out how to fit this square peg of crypto into the round hole of existing financial regulations. And honestly, it's a conversation that's just getting started. There are no easy answers here.
Yeah, one thing's for sure, the stakes are high. The decisions made now will have a big impact for years to come, shaping not just the future of finance, but potentially even the global balance of power. Remember that scenario we talked about with countries competing to hoard Bitcoin like it's the new gold?
Yeah, it's a crazy thought, almost like something out of a cyberpunk novel. But it's not totally impossible, is it? The lines between science fiction and reality are getting kind of blurry these days.
Exactly. And that's what makes this whole topic so interesting. We're seeing the birth of a new technological era, and it's happening right now. There are risks, uncertainties, and ethical problems, but there's also a huge potential for innovation and positive change.
It's like we're standing at the edge of something really transformative. And while it can be a little scary, it's also exciting.
I totally agree. It's a privilege to be a part of this conversation and to watch this historical moment unfold.
Well, we've gone over a lot in this deep dive. The news, the analysis, the potential for a global Bitcoin race, and even the ethical questions that come with this new era of digital assets. We hope we've given you a lot to think about.
And remember, this is just the beginning. This story is far from over, and we'll keep following it closely, bringing you in-depth analysis and expert insights.
We encourage you to do your own research, stay curious, and engage in these important conversations. The future of finance is being decided right now, and it's up to all of us to make sure it happens in a responsible way.
Thanks for joining us on this journey. Until next time, stay informed and stay engaged.